You are told that being a perfect student is your path to success. What if I told you that overachievers often become the most miserable adults in society? This sounds logical because we see valedictorians getting into prestigious universities and landing impressive first jobs. But there's something that doesn't quite add up about where these perfect students end up. Why do so many former honor students struggle with depression and anxiety in their 30s? What would you say if the skills that made you successful in school actually make you unsuccessful in real life? Perfect students consistently excel at following instructions and meeting predetermined requirements. But what if adult success requires exactly the opposite abilities that school never taught you?
Consider how differently school success and life success actually work. School rewards compliance, predictability, and following established procedures perfectly. Life rewards innovation, risk-taking, and creating new procedures when old ones stop working. The overachiever trap works by programming students to seek external validation and follow preset paths, while real success requires internal motivation and creating your own path. If you want to understand why perfect students often become perfect employees but never perfect leaders, subscribe to Prof. Jung Explain and share this video with someone who is always the smartest person in the room. They need to see why their academic success might be limiting their life potential. The system creates fundamentally different definitions of success between academic environments and professional environments. When we say high achievement, we mean totally different things depending on whether you're in school or in the real world. In school, high achievement means excelling at tasks that others have designed for you. Complete assignments exactly as specified. Study material that professors have predetermined. Take tests that measure your ability to reproduce information in expected formats. In professional life, high achievement means creating value that didn't exist before you arrived. Identify problems that others haven't noticed. Develop solutions that don't have instruction manuals. Build systems that generate results without constant supervision. Think about the last time you had to solve a problem that didn't come with a rubric. Did your academic training actually help you figure out what to do? This explains something curious about career trajectories. Many valedictorians end up in stable, well-paying professional jobs that use their analytical skills, but don't require leadership or innovation. Law, medicine, engineering, consulting. These are fields where following complex procedures correctly leads to predictable success. Meanwhile, many average students end up starting companies, leading teams, or creating new industries because they learn to navigate uncertainty and ambiguity rather than just executing predetermined plans. The difference isn't about intelligence or work ethic. It creates fundamentally different approaches to handling unknown situations. Perfect students learn to panic when they don't know the right answer. Average students learn to experiment until they find something that works. But here's where it gets interesting. The overachiever trap doesn't just affect career choices. It actually changes how people think about happiness and fulfillment throughout their adult lives. Perfect students develop what psychologists call conditional self-worth. Their sense of value depends entirely on external recognition and measurable achievements. They need constant feedback, regular promotions, and clear metrics to feel successful. This creates enormous psychological pressure because adult life rarely provides the structured feedback systems that school environments offer. Real accomplishments often take years to materialize, and the most meaningful achievements can't always be measured with simple metrics. Consider how this affects relationships and personal satisfaction. Perfect students often approach relationships like academic assignments. They try to follow rules for dating, marriage, and parenting as if there were correct answers that would guarantee good results. But relationships require emotional intelligence, compromise, and navigation of complex interpersonal dynamics that can't be solved through research and rule following. The perfectionist mindset that works in academic settings often damages intimate relationships because it treats partners like problems to be solved rather than people to be understood. Many former honor students report feeling lonely and misunderstood in their personal lives because they struggle with the ambiguity and unpredictability of human emotions and social dynamics. The overachiever trap becomes even more sophisticated when we examine how it handles innovation and creativity. School environments typically punish deviation from established procedures and reward conformity to predetermined standards. Perfect students learn to suppress their natural curiosity and creative impulses in favor of producing work that meets teacher expectations. They develop exceptional skills at analyzing existing information, but struggle with generating original ideas or questioning fundamental assumptions. This conditioning continues into professional environments, where former perfect students often excel at optimizing existing systems, but struggle with creating new approaches or challenging conventional wisdom. Do you find yourself waiting for someone to tell you what the right answer is, instead of experimenting with different possibilities? But there's something even more insidious happening here. The overachiever trap doesn't just limit creative thinking. It actually creates anxiety and depression by establishing unrealistic expectations about how life should work. Perfect students expect that hard work and careful planning should always lead to predictable, positive outcomes. When life presents them with setbacks, failures, or situations that can't be controlled through effort alone, they interpret these experiences as personal failures. This leads to what therapists call perfectionist paralysis. Former honor students often become so afraid of making mistakes that they avoid taking any significant risks or pursuing ambitious goals. They choose safe, predictable paths, even when those paths don't align with their interests or values. The irony is that the perfectionist mindset that helped them succeed in school actually prevents them from taking the calculated risks and learning from failures that adult success requires. Consider how the overachiever trap affects financial decision-making and wealth building. Perfect students typically pursue careers with predictable salary structures and clear advancement paths. They become doctors, lawyers, consultants, or corporate managers. These careers provide good incomes, but limited wealth building opportunities because they trade time for money rather than creating assets or building businesses. Former perfect students often have high salaries, but low net worth, because they never learn to think like investors or entrepreneurs. Meanwhile, students who are comfortable with uncertainty and experimentation often gravitate toward business ownership, real estate investment, or other wealth-building strategies that require tolerance for ambiguity and willingness to learn from mistakes. The overachiever trap also creates what economists call opportunity cost blindness. Perfect students become so focused on excelling within existing systems that they miss opportunities to create better systems or pursue unconventional paths. They might spend years climbing corporate ladders or pursuing advanced degrees when the same time and energy could have been invested in building businesses or developing skills that generate passive income. This happens because school teaches students to optimize for grades and rankings rather than teaching them to evaluate whether the game itself is worth playing. Can you remember a time when you continued pursuing something because you were good at it rather than because it was actually beneficial for your long-term goals? The overachiever trap becomes particularly cruel when we examine how it handles midlife transitions and career changes. Many former perfect students reach their 30s and 40s feeling successful on paper, but deeply unfulfilled personally. They have impressive resumes, good salaries, and social recognition, but they feel trapped in careers that don't utilize their full potential or align with their authentic interests. The problem is that their entire identity and self-worth have become tied to external achievements and other people's approval. Making significant life changes feels terrifying because it might mean temporary failure or reduced status, which perfect students have been conditioned to avoid at all costs. They often stay in unsatisfying situations because uncertainty feels more dangerous than continued dissatisfaction. This creates what psychologists call golden handcuff syndrome. The external rewards of their achievement-oriented lifestyle make it difficult to pursue more fulfilling but less conventional alternatives. The overachiever trap also exploits what behavioral economists call the sunk cost fallacy. Perfect students who have invested years in becoming excellent at specific skills or pursuing particular career paths often continue down those paths even when they realize they're not leading to satisfaction or fulfillment. They feel that changing direction would mean wasting all the time and effort they've already invested. So they continue pursuing goals that no longer serve their interests or values. This psychological trap keeps many talented people stuck in careers and lifestyles that don't actually make them happy, but that they feel obligated to continue because of their past achievements. Consider how the overachiever trap affects parenting and family relationships. Many former perfect students approach parenting with the same perfectionist mindset that worked in academic settings. They research every decision, follow expert advice religiously, and try to optimize their children's development through careful planning and extensive preparation. But children don't develop according to predetermined curricula, and parenting requires adaptability, patience, and acceptance of uncertainty. The perfectionist parenting approach often creates additional pressure for both parents and children, and it can interfere with the spontaneous bonding and emotional connection that healthy family relationships require. Former perfect students often struggle with the messiness and unpredictability of family life because they expect that good intentions and careful effort should lead to controllable outcomes. The overachiever trap also creates what we might call success addiction. Perfect students become psychologically dependent on external validation and measurable achievements to feel worthy and valuable. This addiction continues into adult life, where former honor students often become workaholics who sacrifice relationships, health, and personal interests in pursuit of career advancement and social recognition. They struggle to enjoy simple pleasures or find satisfaction in activities that don't lead to tangible achievements because their reward systems have been programmed to respond only to external praise and competitive success. This success addiction often leads to burnout, anxiety, and depression because it requires constantly increasing levels of achievement to maintain the same psychological satisfaction. Do you ever feel like your accomplishments don't bring lasting happiness and you need to achieve even more to feel good about yourself? But perhaps the most insidious aspect of the overachiever trap is how it handles authenticity and personal identity. Perfect students learn to suppress their natural personality traits and interests in favor of becoming whoever they need to be to succeed in academic environments. They become experts at performing the role of the ideal student, but they often lose touch with their authentic preferences, values, and desires in the process. This performance becomes so habitual that many former perfect students reach adulthood without a clear sense of who they actually are outside of their achievements. They know how to be successful according to other people's criteria, but they struggle to define success in terms that feel personally meaningful and authentic. The overachiever trap perpetuates itself through what we might call achievement mythology. Society celebrates stories of valedictorians who become successful professionals, reinforcing the narrative that academic excellence leads to life satisfaction. But these success stories typically omit important details about the psychological costs of perfectionism and the limitations of achievement-oriented lifestyles. They don't mention the anxiety, depression, relationship difficulties, and existential emptiness that many high achievers experience. The mythology also ignores alternative definitions of success that might be more fulfilling but less socially recognized. Personal growth, meaningful relationships, creative expression, and contributing to community don't always translate into impressive resume items or social media posts. Former perfect students often struggle to value these achievements because they've been conditioned to measure their worth through external validation and competitive ranking rather than internal satisfaction and authentic self-expression. The overachiever trap also benefits from what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error. When perfect students succeed academically, they attribute their success to their personal qualities like intelligence and discipline. But when they struggle in adult life, they often attribute their difficulties to personal inadequacies rather than recognizing that the skills rewarded in academic settings don't always transfer to real-world challenges. This self-blame prevents them from questioning whether their approach to life might need adjustment, and it reinforces their tendency to try harder at strategies that aren't actually serving their long-term interests. Consider how the overachiever trap affects entrepreneurship and innovation. Many former perfect students avoid starting businesses or pursuing creative projects because these activities require tolerance for failure and willingness to iterate through multiple unsuccessful attempts. The perfectionist mindset that works in academic settings becomes a liability in entrepreneurial environments where rapid experimentation, learning from mistakes, and adapting to unexpected challenges are essential skills. Former perfect students often prefer employment situations where their responsibilities are clearly defined and their performance can be measured against established criteria rather than ventures where they would need to create their own success metrics and navigate uncertain outcomes. This career preference limits their potential for building wealth, creating innovative solutions, or developing leadership skills that require comfort with ambiguity and decision-making under uncertainty. The overachiever trap also creates what economists call diversification failure. Perfect students typically focus intensively on developing expertise in specific academic subjects or professional skills. This specialization strategy works well in structured environments, but it creates vulnerability in rapidly changing economic conditions, where broad adaptability and multiple skill sets provide more security than deep expertise in narrow areas. Former perfect students often struggle with career transitions, economic downturns, or industry disruptions because they've invested so heavily in becoming excellent at specific tasks rather than developing the learning agility and adaptive capacity that modern careers require. But perhaps the most tragic aspect of the overachiever trap is how it handles personal fulfillment and life satisfaction. Many former perfect students reach middle age having achieved everything they were supposed to want, but feeling empty and directionless. They have accomplished impressive goals, earned social recognition, and secured financial stability, but they struggle to find meaning and purpose in their daily lives because their entire identity was built around external validation rather than internal values and authentic interests. The overachiever trap has convinced them that happiness should result from achievement. So when achievement doesn't deliver lasting satisfaction, they assume they need to achieve even more, rather than questioning whether they're pursuing the wrong types of goals entirely. And perhaps most remarkably, the overachiever trap has convinced society that questioning achievement-oriented lifestyles is somehow promoting mediocrity or laziness. When examining whether perfectionist conditioning actually serves people's long-term interests is essential for understanding how to create educational and professional environments that support both success and well-being. The overachiever trap represents one of the most successful mechanisms for creating productive but unfulfilled adults. It takes naturally curious and capable young people and programs them to become excellent servants of existing systems rather than innovators who might create better alternatives for themselves and society. The overachiever trap also creates what psychologists call learned helplessness in unconventional situations. Perfect students become so accustomed to having clear guidelines and predetermined success criteria that they feel paralyzed when facing situations that require independent judgment and creative problem solving. This learned helplessness extends to personal relationships, financial decisions, and career choices where there aren't right answers or established procedures to follow. Former perfect students often seek excessive amounts of advice and research before making decisions because they're uncomfortable trusting their own judgment without external validation. This dependency on external guidance prevents them from developing the confidence and decision-making skills that adult independence requires, keeping them in perpetual student mode even decades after graduation. Consider how the overachiever trap affects mental health and stress management. Perfect students typically handle academic pressure by working harder and sleeping less, strategies that provide short-term results in educational environments. But adult challenges often require different approaches, like setting boundaries, delegating responsibilities, or accepting that some problems can't be solved through individual effort alone. Former perfect students often struggle with these strategies because they conflict with the self-reliance and control orientation that academic success rewarded. This leads to chronic stress, anxiety, and burnout because they continue applying academic coping strategies to adult problems that require completely different skill sets. They blame themselves for not working hard enough, rather than recognizing that their approach might be fundamentally mismatched to the challenges they're facing. The overachiever trap also exploits what economists call the status quo bias. Perfect students become comfortable with institutional environments that provide structure, clear expectations, and regular feedback about their performance. This comfort with institutional settings often prevents them from pursuing entrepreneurial opportunities or unconventional career paths that might offer greater potential for wealth building or personal fulfillment, but that require tolerance for ambiguity and self-directed goal setting. They choose familiar environments even when those environments limit their growth potential, because uncertainty feels more threatening than continued achievement within established systems. The system maintains itself by rewarding conformity to existing structures while making alternative approaches seem risky or irresponsible, even when those alternatives might actually serve individual interests better than conventional paths. The overachiever trap perpetuates itself through what we might call achievement momentum. Once perfect students establish their identity around academic excellence, changing direction feels like betraying their core sense of self. They continue pursuing goals that no longer serve their interests because their entire social identity and self-concept have become tied to being the person who excels at predetermined tasks and meets other people's expectations. This identity momentum keeps many talented individuals trapped in careers and lifestyles that don't utilize their full potential or provide genuine satisfaction, but that maintain their image as successful people who make responsible choices. If you want more analysis of how educational conditioning affects adult life outcomes, subscribe to Prof. John Explained and share this with someone who was always told they had unlimited potential. They need to understand why their academic success might have prepared them for a life they don't actually want to live.